Incremental greetings! Today I have a long outstanding video and I want to share my 2 cents about the pros and cons of having one collection or many, which there's no single answer, depends on how you use SuperMemo. So what I will cover in this video is the pros and cons of multiple collections, of one single collection, then when you should create a new collection, when it's worth it, makes sense to create a new collection, and when makes sense to merge a collection to another one, which doesn't mean you merge all of the collections to have one single collection necessarily. You could have 4 and merge 1, so you only have 3. So let's look into this. I will start defending why you should use multiple collections. First, it's a lot easier to prioritize. Why? Because you have less elements. Imagine I have 100,000 elements overall, but I have different collections. One for language, one for incremental reading, one for practice, So I'm dividing the element count. Therefore, I have multiple priority queues and a smaller priority queues. Therefore, as a user, especially if I'm still not that skilled prioritizing, it makes the decision a lot easier. That's a good pro, especially at the beginning. Then, you may know that some metrics, some of the stats are depending on the collection. Now, this is empty because I'm in my slide collection. So, you know that Super SM18 will be optimizing to your retention rate, forgetting index, and stuff like this. So that's a good pro, that you can fine-tune this. Hey, for whatever reason, let's say I'm learning Chinese, it's a lot harder. I can have a different collection, and the algorithm will optimize to that lower performance that I have without interfering my own collection, my main collection. Then, quicker search and overall experience loading elements. Let me show you one example. This very simple example. I only have 4,000 elements. Pam pam pam. They are loaded in the browser. Good. What happens if I go to my other? That's one of my old backups of my English collection. So in this case, I will only open Merriam. And look at this. 15 seconds I have to wait to load the contents in the browser window. And this could be even worse if I select the root or just the topics and stuff like this. And wait, I'm not going to edit this, so you know how long it takes. Look at that. Oh, now even the layout is weird. I think that's because I'm using a different resolution. 1 sec. And also it's more likely that this happens. When you open a huge branch with many elements, you have this weird behavior when it loads. It takes a lot of time. And the same for the search. Okay, let's say I want to look for this, Memoholic, in my collection. In this case, it's a very weird word. It's unlikely to be in any other place I have. Makes sense. But what if I want, I don't know, I want to find, let's say. This has more hits, and look how slow it is again. So that when you have multiple collections, what happens? That the search is quicker. And everything that requires going through a lot of elements will be also quicker because you are dividing the elements across multiple collections. And related to this is that it's easier to back up because there's less data to back up of that collection. And same, if you go and you want to repair the collection, to rebuild the registry, verify file space, that will be, and repetition history will be quicker because there are less. Then, it's very likely you will have fewer concepts. For instance, in this collection, I only have 4. And in my main collection, I have 30 something, because I don't repeat concepts. Doesn't have to be present in all of the collections I have. Are specialized. So when you go to the registry, it's more likely that you have less to choose from. And the same for templates, for instance. Here I only have 5. Because in this collection, I won't do multiple choice, image occlusion, and all of that. So I can delete all of those templates, and it's more specialized. Therefore, the possible choice is more limited, which is good, it's something positive. And you have multiple outstanding queues. Each collection will have a different outstanding queue. Therefore, if you care, if you have the mental pressure to see the 0 every day to finish your reps, in some collections it will be easier to reach that point because there are less repetitions to do. And you can neglect one collection, let's say. So at one, let's say your main collection, you will be able to finish it, to 0 it a lot easier. Those are the pros. Then the cons. You're sacrificing what's called interleaved practice. Why? Because you can only do repetitions on what's in the collection. Yes, you could still do some interleaved practice if, let's say, every 10 minutes or 20 minutes, you switch collections. So you can do macro interleaving, but not micro. That means that now I do some click learn, I have a repetition in economics, then in English language, then Chinese, now about meta learning, So I'm switching topics a lot more. Repetition to repetition. And if I do multiple collections, I will be limiting this experience. Because let's say I have a dedicated collection for English, and another for Chinese, let's say, another for school. Then what happens that it's unlikely we'll see language related items. So we'll be interleaving less. For me, this is one of the major cons. Then limited search. What happens in SuperMemo is that I can only search in the current collection. So if I want to search Memo Holic, it's not the best example, but it's the one I had, so I will use it. It's, oh yeah, perhaps it's not found here, or I found some elements here, some other ones in another collection. Oh yeah, I remember I had this, but in which collection I had that, right? So I don't have cross collection search. So if I don't find it in this collection, I will have to go to another collection and repeat the search. I asked Winston the other day, but we had a session when he showed me his flow. He has multiple collections, like 15 at least. And here's what he does. He does the search in every single collection until he finds it. So therefore, it's quite limited search. Same for duplicate detection. So if I want to import something with the old import or the new import, I won't have the duplicate detection because this is imported in a different collection. Might be imported from a different collection. So I may be using the same source twice without realizing this. Then, is easy to neglect collections. Yes, you can have collections open at the same time, like I do now. Now I have the English, my main collection, and you can use the tab if you want to cycle those. But if you have multiple, at some point you will create a habit that you will start always with certain collection, the other one will be tedious, and then you forget about it. And next day, oh shoot, I forgot. I didn't do the reps of that other collection. and some days pass and you have done anything. So it's easier to neglect it, opposed that if you have it like in a dedicated branch. If you had one single collection, you may be, for instance, incremental writing, the first chunk. So I see it on the knowledge tree, so it's easier for me to remind, oh wow, I didn't do the reps today, let's do it. And I would say it's not a con per se, it's just inconvenience that the templates and styling are not shared. So if you want to share, let's say, this dark mode that I have across collections, every time that I create a collection, I will have to copy and paste the styling or the templates. My item template is different from the default. So I will have to copy and paste at least one, or go here, template, copy, or save to file if it's always the same one. Paste it in the other collection. I mean, it's not a big deal, but it's adding some friction. And last but not least is that you may lose the big picture for some stats, because some stats are collection-wise. But for instance, here I have, well, in this case, it's not that meaningful because I don't have much usage, but hey, the usage I have here is from this collection, slides. So usually here is when I do something. I would say that this collection exists because of my channel. If I won't do videos related to SuperMemo, I won't have this collection to begin with. So what happens here that, okay, I have this usage, but how I use SuperMemo that day? Let's say January 24th. Because, oh, I did here pump some points. Yeah, because I don't see the entire usage of SuperMemo, just this collection. So it will be nice if I could plot the entire usage regardless of which collection I used. That doesn't exist. And the stats here, if you care, and some other, like in analytics, the usage, the work done. So how many repetitions I have done that day, I don't know, because I have multiple collections. I don't have the entire picture. Unless I do open all of the collections, I export the data, and then I aggregate this data and plot it again to see the exact aggregation of stats. What about single collection? Now I will be defending why you should use one single collection. First, the duplicate detection is straightforward, because if it's not in my collection, it's not in SuperMemo, because I don't have any other collection. Easy. Then I maximize the interleave practice, because everything is in my collection. Therefore, at every time that I click learn, the next repetition can be anything, any other concept, topic, unrelated to the one I did. Because I have everything that I have in my collection is everything I want to do in SuperMemo. And all the stats are visible at once. Like the usage time, the amount of repetitions, and all of that sort. So what I see in this collection is what I have done so far in SuperMemo. I'm not losing something that is being counted in a different place. And that's about it. You may be surprised that that's it? Yes, more or less that's it. There are no pros of using one single collection. To my, keep in mind, I'm filtering with my personal biases here, and based on my experience so far. Then the cons of single collection, which somewhat will be the opposite of the pros of multiple collections. It's harder to prioritize. Why? Because you have everything in one single collection. That means that you have a lot of elements. So if I go to my English collection, I have 329,000 elements. This requires a lot of precision already with priority. So I have to go with kind of couple of decimals already. Because 1%, 2%, well wait, with this 1% range, it's like 3,000 positions in the queue already. And this is just my English collection. So when I had everything put together, I had slightly more than 1,500, 500,000 elements. Imagine how you prioritize elements when you have 500,000 positions. It's extremely, extremely hard, especially if that didn't happen more incrementally with 3 decades, like the case of Wozniak. And most of those elements, what's happened is that it will be unprocessed. So this is a consequence of a collection growing faster because you're not dividing the collection. Then slower backup, slower operation with elements, and slower repair collection. Everything is a consequence of having more elements in the collection. SuperMemo doesn't scale well with size. Everything becomes slower and slower. And it's not using your hardware. So even if you have a supercomputer and you repair the collection, it will be using like 10 megabytes of your RAM memory. And then remember, repairing a collection, repairing this collection, this means hours. The English collection means hours, several hours. And if I want to do a detailed, that is an entire night. So I leave the computer, do the job while I'm sleeping. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. And then, one con of a single collection, which may be surprising, is that a con? Is that you have more concepts and templates to choose from. Basically, is when I do Ctrl-Shift-M, for instance, in this case, is article picture, article, item, item picture, or empty. End of the story. I don't have, for instance, I have a dedicated collection for video, for YouTube. Okay, so I have that predefined. So here I will start, okay, so I'm adding some cognitive load here to decide, that's the name, or I have more time with the S, so let me start filtering the list, this kind of stuff. And especially with the concepts, it's more likely that you have more concepts than templates. So on the images, if you want to reuse an image, you'll have a lot more images to choose from. So you have to make more specific search query to find it, or rely more on conventions. So you distinguish weight with other candidates better. Therefore, it makes it harder. Then, we have seen more or less the pros and cons, the meaningful pros and cons. There are some other ones that I left out because they're unlikely, those are features very unlikely you'll be using. Just to let you know that it's a selection. Then, regardless of the pros and cons, you may want to create a new collection regardless. Because perhaps the best choice is to create a brand new collection, even if it's temporarily. That means there's a certain lifespan of that collection. And then you will merge it at some point, or delete it at some point. So when you should create a brand new collection? First is when you have a school-related collection. So you have your collection for incremental reading, your pleasure, whatever you care, your free learning, and then a dedicated collection for the curriculum-based, what you're coerced to go through. You don't want to mix that. You could mix by interleaving the collections, time to time, one over the other, but not the elements in the same place, even though you could merge it later. The merging will be covered in the next chapter in this video. Another situation could be when you have an intense language learning in SuperMemo. This happened to me. So now I still do, at some degree, language learning, only for English, when it comes across what I read for incremental reading purposes. So if I have the source there, I just make the closation and it's there. I don't care if it's not in my main collection, because what is important is that it's in my brain, not that it's everything classified. Oh, this is language learning, therefore should be here, everything put together. No, no, no. There's no need for that. But what happens? That if you do this intensely, you will have a lot more items for language learning than incremental reading. And what happens with learning? What happens with language is that it's more semantic in nature. It's harder to remember. So the performance will be lower, will tend to be lower. And what happens that you have a mismatch of difficulty, which is the next item. So you have items, let's say Chinese, that I feel more. This will be changing the average, because one of the calculations of here of those metrics are collection-wise. So therefore, I will have, let's say, easy items for incremental reading and hard items, and the collection will be optimizing for the middle ground, which is not representative of most of the elements I have in my collection. So in order to avoid this mismatch, I will have a dedicated collection, just for the sake of the optimum interval, lead management, and so on. Then perhaps when I increase my proficiency in the language, perhaps it will even out at some degree, like it's now true for me with English. Is I know I could merge it if I want to, because of difficulty. But still, I could not merge it if I want to, because it's too much. Then what will happen is that my priority queue, my outstanding queue, 90% will be language, and 10% will be incremental reading. It's way too much in quantity, not in difficulty, in quantity. Therefore, long story short, if it's too difficult, make a different collection. You can merge it anytime when the difficulty changes. If you want super intense language learning, therefore you will create a lot of items. And when I mean a lot, is a few hundred easily, with no effort. A dedicated collection. Another case, you may want to create a new collection, is for incremental writing. If you use SuperMemo for incremental writing, some collections will be focused just with an article, with the purpose to create an article or an essay or a book, depending on the size. So that deserves a different collection. So you use SuperMemo with all of the features, but for the sake of producing information from your knowledge by writing. Another case to create a new collection is what I call container collections. So you're not learning per se. You're not creating items of those. And examples are photos. Like you could have with image photos, but with SuperMemo. Piotr does this. So your personal photos with family, friends, you can have them, and you can use SuperMemo for incrementally tagging those images, and not forget some old images and photos. But I think today there's no need to do this in SuperMemo. There are more fancier ways to do it now. And same for jukebox. So you could schedule the repetitions. And this is more or less the same, for instance, the piano collection from Winston, that you use it for procedural learning, to learn a skill, to practice a skill. So you use a collection that have topics. The topics is to play that song. And you are scheduling the practice. So you have a dedicated collection for that. And the last, but not least, can be especially useful at the very beginning, is to use a different collection for trying out features. You don't want to mess around with your genuine collection, because most of the features in SuperMemo cannot be undone. This could be a backup, doesn't have to be a brand new collection, but it's a good way to learn for real how it works. Reading the documentation is usually not enough. You need to put it into practice. Then, having said all of this, as well, you have created all of those collections, but when you should merge those, if you ever merge those, because sometimes those collections will be endless and undefined in time. So you will always have multiple collections. But not always. For instance, if you create a collection for the school, Once you finish the course or the exam, depends how you fine tune the the process. You could merge these to the main collection, if you will. I have one example, one video that covered this. And strictly speaking, you don't want to merge collections, strictly speaking. Don't do this. It's so baggy. Don't do it. It can be done, but you lose the concepts, the reset, and. In my opinion, it's not worth it. Don't do it. Instead, go with select the root and export transfer elements instead. Which at the end of the day, it's more or less the same end product. You will have the same elements in a branch in your collection, and you will lose the same amount of information. A lot of data here that is cumulative will not be kept, will not be transferred to the collection. The amount of repetitions you have done, and all of that. The element count will be updated, the outstanding, all of those. That means that you're losing stats at some degree. So strictly speaking, you merge a collection by transferring a branch, the root branch. Another one is, okay, let's say that I have done some language learning, even if it was intensive. But after a while, in incrementalist perspective, this while can be a year or more. I'm not adding anything. I stop. So I'm only maintaining what I had done before. That means that I have no new elements, no pending queue at all. So all of the items you will have at the very least 2 reps. The one of the creation and one genuine repetition after that. So when you reach that point and you don't want to keep, I want to move on. I won't keep learning that language anymore or that further or not as intensive. You can merge it to another collection or your main collection because the intervals will be already quite high. That's what I did with my English collection. The average interval, I don't remember now, but it was like 2 years or 3 years already. So yeah, I'm going to see 10 items a day at maximum for a while, and then 5, and then even less, because the intervals are quite large already. So it's not a big deal. Then, when the material is no longer in a different difficulty, so let's say what happened in Chinese is that I started from scratch. Unlike English, I was already proficient in English. Not enough, room for improvement. But what happens when you are absolutely new is that it's a lot harder. It's too semantic. So after a while, you will realize that, hey, my performance is somewhat the same. So even if I still do intense language learning, or regardless of my intensity, if the purpose of having a dedicated collection was purely by this match of difficulty, well, mismatch is no longer significant. I have no reason to sacrifice the lost interleaved practice. So if I want to interleave it, let me merge it, because it doesn't have a toll anymore in the scheduling algorithm. And finally, when you may want to merge a collection, which is not always, is when you have an incremental writing collection and you are considered finished, because the collection is never finished. A collection in SuperMemo, it's never ending. It's undefined. But the existence of a collection can have a predefined goal. Like, hey, I will do an article about how to use a spaced repetition. For instance, Piotr. Genius. Okay, so I will do a collection dedicated to Genius because that is a long, extensive article I want to write using incremental writing. Eventually, it will be good enough that I will publish it. So what I could do is I just keep it. That means that it won't be any longer in my favorites to choose from. It will be archived in my computer, but it's still there. If I want, I could delete it. Oh, you know what? It's obsolete. I have an online copy, my wiki. I'm not going to touch this in the next 2 decades or ever. Boom, I delete it. No worries. Or you know what? It has been so intensive and so creative that I realized I made new connections, associations with some knowledge I have, and I want to keep that. I learned something new from information I already knew. No new information I have. It's information insights from known information. So are the relationships of those pieces of knowledge. You know what? This is a golden nugget. This is a golden nugget. I want to keep that. So therefore, perhaps I will only merge a subset of that collection. Only the items I created. Or what I consider it's massive. Those topics are super important, golden nugget material. So perhaps I will create a subset. Let's say it's this. So overall, is how many collections is best for you to use? Depends what you do. If you do just incremental reading, you do languages, multiple languages at different skills. If you also want to write, not just learn. If you do videos, and perhaps one of the things that for me is a con, for you can be a pro. That, hey, perhaps, let's say videos. I don't want to interleave videos. So I will create a standalone collection for the purpose of limited interleave practice, because I don't want to interleave videos in my collection. So grasp with this, with everything I say, it's just recommendation. Don't take this as the Bible, as what you need to follow because I'm an expert. Remember, don't always follow what the experts do. Adapt what is useful for you. Discard what is useless for you and make your experience your own, as I did. What you see in this list is already a filter of this philosophy. So now, even if you see here I have multiple collections, that's one I did for incremental reading back in the day for answering the survey. That's the English that I no longer use. Yeah, that's an example, for instance, of I didn't keep doing this, but it will be a good example that, hey, I have Norwegian and a standalone, not because it's harder. It's the opposite. Because the languages I always learned as an adult has been Asian languages, which are a lot harder. And Norwegian, which is a lot similar in English. Even though I don't speak German, it will be a lot easier if I did. The difficulty was a lot easier for being language learning. So I didn't want to have Norwegian alongside Chinese because of the mismatch. But because it was easier than average, not harder than average. Or what's the other one? And this is an example of the questions to answer the survey. And well, the survey had certain amount of questions. So once I'm done with the questions, I will publish the survey, which I did. And that's it. It's the end of the collection. I don't need any purpose to keep these in my main collection. And in this case, it's really a stretch. But I could have created 3 items. Oh, based by serendipity. I didn't have the intention to do that. In this case, it's quite a stretch because, come on, I don't want to remember this. How can I share the survey? Or if those are optional. It was just for the sake of the example that I did this. But you get the point. Now what I will do is I will export this to my collection because I want to keep those 3 golden nuggets. In this case, they're not golden nuggets, but you get the point. And I could delete this, or what happened, that is not longer in my favorites. Now it's in my favorites because I was recording this video and I prepared this list. Usually it's not like this. And perhaps years later, I can revisit this if I want to. I could do it now, for instance, and see how it differs. What I like about most SuperMemo, yeah, I can tell you this is outdated. So here is like some nostalgic that, oh, what I have thought before, and so on. But the purpose of this collection, it's done already. So, hope everything makes sense, has been helpful for you. Please let me know if I skipped some details, I missed some pros that are considerable. Let me know in the comments, and see you incrementally.